Hey there, it's Misty. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to share with you the cards that I made for this week's Simon Says Stamp Wednesday challenge. Our theme is For a Special Lady, and we are showcasing products from Altenew. So with Mother's Day right around the corner, I thought this was a perfect opportunity to make my 3 Mother's Day cards. Now, this turned out to be quite a long video, but I am doing some no-line watercoloring. And if you've never done no-line watercoloring, I just wanted to keep the coloring in because there's some tips that I have along the way. So right now I'm starting out on some Arches cold press watercolor paper, and I'm using an image or the images from the Peony Bouquet stamp set by Altenew. And I went ahead and stamped it out with some antique linen distress ink, and then for the leaves I used peeled paint. I'm using my Magello Mission Gold watercolor palette, and I'll list the colors that I used because for the first flower I colored, I mixed up a couple different colors, and then the other color was the other flower was just a straight color. So I'll list that on the screen. But I wanted kind of a coral color or kind of an orange color. So I mixed some red and yellow together. Now I'm going to try to define each petal by keeping them separated. I'm not going to color a petal that is touching a petal I already colored until it's dry. And the best way, I can figure out how to define the petals is by coloring the petal that's behind, like say the white, the petal in front of it. Color the darkest area around the edge on the petal behind it so it'll stand out a little bit. I hope that makes sense. Now see here I colored a little bit of the petal up in the top right, but I forgot about it, so it dried pretty quickly. And these aren't like distressings where you can go back in and add more color or water and blend it out. So I just went over it with a little bit darker color, which is fine. I wanted my leaves to be a little bit different colors, or my petals, So I'm just going to add more color until you can't see that line anymore. But see how I have it darkest at the bottom of the leaf the petal I colored, and that'll define the petal in front of it. So darkest color at the base, and then I'll add water and lighten it up towards the tip where it'll be the lightest, and then the petal behind it will be darkest at the bottom. So it should define each petal. At least that's the plan anyway. But I just wanted to keep this in because I am no expert at watercoloring or no line watercoloring, but I've learned some tips on how to, define your image, especially with flowers. So with the no line watercoloring, the edges that you see that I stamped with the antique linen, you're not going to see that once this is done. So you have to somehow define your image and the lines of your image. So that's the best way I learned how to do it. So I'm just going around and I'm coloring petals that don't touch each other. And I'm coloring the petals in the background first. I think that's the easiest way to do it. But at some point I had to mix more of my color, and of course it wasn't exactly the same color I had previously mixed, so I think it just adds to it, because petals aren't always the same exact color, and I like that about this. I like that some of the petals are a little bit more orangey or more reddish than the other petals. So that's one good thing about mixing your own colors, is you kind of have some differentiation. I think that's a word, differentiation amongst your petals. Let me know if that's a real word. I think it is, but I'm good at making up my own if one doesn't fit my sentence. Another important thing is to make sure you have a paper towel handy because, sometimes like I'd get too much color up on the tip of the petal and it can dry pretty quickly. Then I would just take a paper towel and dab the color off, and it lightens it up quite a bit. Sometimes it can almost remove the color completely. So once I zoom out, you'll probably see my well-loved paper towel. Couldn't live without paper towels while watercoloring. And I usually will watercolor with distress inks, so it was kind of fun to use these Magello watercolors. I don't use them very often, but they have beautiful colors, and of course you can mix your own colors as well. I do like watercoloring with distress inks though, because you know which color you're gonna get, and you can always add either more color or add water, and it's really easy to blend your colors that way. If you get a color that's a little bit too dark, you just add water, and even if it's dry, you can add water, and it will reactivate it, and you have lots of freedom to manipulate it with water, with distress inks. I think it depends on what paper you use too. I like this paper a lot. It's not white, it's kind of an off-white, but for these cards, I was okay with that. I really liked the off-white. And it had a good amount of texture to it too. So see, I'm doing the darkest color there at the base of the petal. The petal behind it though, I think is the other flower, so it's not really a good example, but see the petal to the right of it, you can tell it's a separate petal because it's two different shades of the same color. And for me, that's the hardest part of coloring flowers, is knowing where to shade and where to lighten. It took me a while to figure out that if a petal is folded over, then the back side of the petal should be lighter, and then at the edge of where it's folded over should be darker, which didn't always work out with this flower here. But like I said, I'm a pretty amateur watercolorist, so it was good enough for me. But it's the same thing with whatever color medium you're using. All right, I'm just gonna put on some music for a little bit so I'm not talking the whole way through this, and I'll check back in a little bit. Alright, now while my petals dry, I'm going to move on to the leaves. And I stamped these out in peeled paint. And these ones I only had to stamp once. The flowers, I actually stamped them 3 times just because that antique linen is so light and I can't put my head right over my image in order to color, because otherwise that's all you would see. So I stamped it 3 times just so I could see what I was working with, and with the texture of the paper, it made it a little bit more difficult to see. So it really doesn't matter if you stamp it once or you twice or you stamp it 3 times, because in the end you're not going to be able to see it at all. And I'm so blind as it is that I really need all the help I can get. If I didn't film my process, I would have one of those, I don't know what they're called, but it's a board that's kind of tipped up at an angle, and I would have one of those really big magnifying glasses with a light attached to my desk, and I would get right up in my images so I can see them and color them, and yeah, that's how I would have it set up if I didn't record my process here. In a perfect world, maybe someday in the future I will have that set up, but I have such a hard time seeing, as you can tell, because my head is always in the shot. But anyway, all right, so I'm going to mask off my flowers here, and I'm not going to worry about the petals because I just wanted to splatter it with some pretty metallic gold, and I wasn't really worried about it getting on the leaves. I just didn't want it covering the petals. I mean, I worked that long and that hard on them. I didn't want to risk me messing them up and not liking them in the end. So I just recently purchased this set of gold paints, and Simon Says Stamp doesn't have this exact one, but they do have one that's very similar to this one. I've actually seen some comparison videos. Sandy Allnock did one, and I mean, they're basically the same paint, so that's what I listed below, but it's not this exact same set. Beautiful color though. I really love this gold. It was just, I feel, to me, that was just the perfect finishing touch, is the gold splatters. And you know, I'm making these for my mom's, so I really wanted these cards to be special, and all these products I'm using today just made that happen, and I'm so happy with how these turned out. I'm using the Script Mom die by Simon Says Stamp. And for the shadow layer, I think it's called, the background layer, I used black cardstock. And then for the top layer, I used the same Arches cold press watercolor paper, just because I wanted the color to match the rest of my card. So I'm just going to quickly glue these two together. And I'm using the Nuvo Smooth Precision glue pen to glue these two together, and I'm just doing just dots all over the background. I didn't want it to splurge out the sides too much, so I always just do dots for these word dies. It's like the perfect amount of glue, and it splurged out a little bit, but nothing too bad. And then to give it a little bit of dimension, I'm going to pop them up on some black foam squares. But first I'm going to glue down my background, which is just black cardstock. And I use the Hero Arts rounded rectangle infinity die to cut my top panel. I love those dies. There's so many in the set, and I don't know, they just give just the perfect rounded edges. I don't know why I like it so much. You know, you can use a corner punch too, and it does the same thing, but for some reason I am in love with this die set. I know, I get strangely addicted to odd things sometimes. Right now it's these dies. And because my front panel was a little bit warped, I'm just going to use the Tombow Extreme adhesive, which works perfectly if your cardstock is a little bit warped. I use this if I do heat embossing. You know how sometimes it warps your paper? This is perfect for that. But especially because this paper's, pretty thick. Got to make sure you get all your corners stuck down permanently. Don't want your card falling apart or nothing. That would be horrible. So I'm just going to go over the top layer with the tonic shimmer pen. I almost went over the white part with the Nouveau crystal glaze, but I didn't trust myself enough to not get it all over the place. I guess I could have just cut it again, but at that point I'd already glued it down to my card front when I realized it, so it would have looked really pretty if the white part was, shiny too. Sparkly and shiny. And these are my new favorite foam squares. They're just a little bit thinner than any of the other foam squares I use. They're really sticky though. That's why, they stick to my fingernails and my fingernail polish, and so I use my tweezers and it sticks to my tweezers, and usually things don't stick to my tweezers. Alright, and then for one last final touch, I'm going to add these gorgeous little dewdrops. Or I guess they're called round drops, not dewdrops, not raindrops, round drops. Because there are raindrops too that are really pretty, but that's not what I used. These are from Studio Katya, and they're really, really clear. I love how clear they are. I was entertaining myself with them because when you put them over the gold splatter, it's a little tiny magnifying glass. It's the little things like this that keep me entertained. And then I'm just going to glue those in place. And that's it. That finishes off my card for this week. Here's a picture of the 3 different cards that I made. 2 of them are the same, just different colors, and then one's a little bit different. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this card that I made for this week's Simon Says Stamp Wednesday Challenge. All of the supplies that I used are listed and linked directly to the Simon Says Stamp shop in the description below, and you can always head over to my blog for more information, including additional pictures. Please like and subscribe if you did like this video, and I'd love to hear which one you like the most out of the 3 cards that I made this week. Just leave me a comment below and let me know. If you want to see more of my videos, there are 2 on screen right now that you can click on if you'd like, and I'll be back next Wednesday with a new video. Thanks again for watching. Bye!